Chapter 3, Inside Man, 2046. Scene 8, Philip. It was only a matter of chance that this was Philip's first visit to the Seychelles. 23 years ago, the archipelago was Ellie's second choice for their most important trip. In the end, they had a wonderful honeymoon in Paris. Still, as he leaned over the railing and admired the granite peaks rising rugged and forested, alongside flat coral islands with lagoons and reefs merging seamlessly into the ocean, Philip longed to be a newlywed again, holding Ellie in his arms. But instead, he was 46, traveling alone and eavesdropping on the President of the United States. As the Elysian fields cut through the jewel-like expanse of the Indian Ocean, the water shifted from shades of blue to green. This was Philip's fourth day of access to the technology that allowed Tafuri to infiltrate any government, any corporation, any noble house. Because of this deal with the devil, Philip was able to watch the president interact with his staff as Air Force One touched down in Victoria, the Seychelles capital. This clandestine view of the administration from behind the scenes was an eye-opening experience. In many ways, Beto reminded Philip of Samir. Both were detail-oriented and strategic. Case in point, to divert the world's attention from this jaunt to a geopolitically insignificant island nation, the White House inserted itself into an AUKUS event. An Australian nuclear-powered submarine entered service this week. There were so many time zone changes between D.C. and the deep-water port of New South Wales that everyone on the plane seemed to appreciate this opportunity to adjust their inner clocks. The press corps had planned excursions throughout the city, since Beto's meeting with Philip was officially listed as a quiet cruise. Now that Air Force One had landed, he was scheduled to set sail from Port Victoria in 30 minutes. It was only noon, and their meeting was at 3, but through the swarm, Philip knew that Beto and Devin had set aside time to compare notes. The drones didn't always transmit video, but their 24-hour surveillance was reliable and relentless. Coordinating as a swarm was a brilliant idea. If one were caught, it wouldn't seem like a threat, being a tiny bit of metal with no apparent ability to communicate on its own. Out of many, Philip thought, there was one. After 4 days of use, he'd concluded the surveillance array was produced by a device whose components were distributed throughout the group. It was remarkable technology, but Philip could not understand how the old man justified the R&D. House Harrington's intelligence service was no match for Tafuri's. Still, Samir had made a valiant effort to solve the mystery surrounding Devin. Miss Russell had been right about his life before high school. Every story, when examined closely, supported another story, like a circular argument. The drones were good at gathering real-time information, but that was useless when it came to Devin's past. The hurry-up-and-wait nature of this 007 bullshit was going to drive Philip insane. Like a traveling salesman battling ennui, he wandered over to a deck chair, kicked off his shoes, and slid a pair of shades over his eyes. Philip would have used telepathy to connect with Ellie, but she was hanging out with the girls, so he leaned back against the chair and fell asleep. An hour later, when Monaco woke him up, the sky was no longer clear. The massive streak of white was bigger than any wind tunnel he'd ever seen. Being part of House Dacos, it was likely Devin had free access to Camelot 1. But this vortex was orders of magnitude larger than anything produced by Victor's airship. Philip's eyes widened as he lifted his shades. It was as if another island was barreling through the sky, moments away from becoming part of the Seychelles. This, Philip thought, must be Avalon. Both Irene and Tafuri had praised Olympia's airship, but Philip was not prepared to experience it himself. The giant white cavern dissipated just as quickly as it formed. With the sudden reappearance of the sun, Philip slid the shades back over his eyes. He'd learned a lot about Beto through the swarm, but this was his first opportunity to observe Devin. Philip knew the features of the Sixth Sense cranial phone like the back of his hand, but connecting to the drone's transmission bore an unsettling resemblance to practicing voodoo. The link was in an app located in the center of Monaco, the slick graphical user interface hovering 2 feet in front of Philip's face. But triggering the feed was like being transported by magic to the president's yacht. One drone must have hidden itself under a deck chair. The surveillance array's low-angle shot made the president look like a giant. In red shorts and a blue golf shirt, he leaned over the railing and stared at the sky. The president had to know the airship was cloaked, given his high-level security clearance. He may not, however, have understood what was going on when the black dot appeared in the approximate location of the ship. Philip, though, recognized the flying vessel as its tubular structure came into view. That's also when he noticed the sandals in Beto's hand. Clutching in flats like a wad of cash, the president could have been a gambler at the Kentucky Derby. Philip took solace in the fact that, despite the swarm's ability to be anywhere, it was still impossible to know what was going on in someone else's mind. Just like in the recording he'd watched in the old man's villa, the black tubular object moved like a living thing, descending toward the yacht with the grace of a bird of prey. Beto followed its trajectory until it came to a stop 4 feet over the deck. Given the drone's camera angle, the flying vessel looked like a giant bullet. Devin climbed out when a section of the top slid away. There was a smile on his face until Beto said, "Welcome aboard, my lord." Devin's smile disappeared. "Just give me the damn sandals," he hissed. Philip laughed. The scene was reminiscent of countless interactions between him and Samir. Nothing distinguished a confidant from an underling like the candor of a true friend, especially since obsequiousness among the staff was common to men in authority. The information gathered by Philip and Samir wasn't public, but private conversations held in government offices still bore the tone of a congressional hearing. Off and on, during the last 4 days, they'd suffered through video that was impersonal, boring, and prosaic. Philip had to admit it was a salacious treat to finally witness something that wasn't that. Feigning offense, Beto practically sang his next words. "I merely bestow upon thee such honor befitting a member of House Dacos. Verily, I am grateful for this audience with one so close to the emperor." Ostensibly, this was meant to mock Victor, but his sarcasm was striking, given that he held the highest legacy office in the country. Was it the opinion of the President of the United States that the Council of Nobles was bullshit? Few people were more aware of how close the country came to ruin than former members of the Armed Forces movement. Victor and Natalia had eventually won the group's support, but if he were honest, Philip was never really sure why. Men like Beto and Devin had sworn an oath to the Constitution. Was it realistic to assume they'd replace that oath with fealty to the Council? Devin yanked the sandals out of Beto's hand and pointed them at his face. "No one's closer to a patriarch than you," he hissed. "That'll all change," Beto replied, "if you marry Olympia." It was impossible to see a blush on the face of a person with such dark skin, but the jibe appeared to have that effect, judging by the way Devin slumped his shoulders. Shaking his head, he tossed the sandals on the deck and slipped them on his feet. Beto said, "Why the fuck were you in California anyway?" Devin narrowed his eyes. "How do you—" Then the answer seemed to hit him immediately. Satellite imagery. The president sucked his teeth. "Come on, soldier. It hasn't been that long since Delta Force." Conceding the point, Devin nodded. "Irene's boyfriend. That's where he lives," he sighed. Olympia was being nosy. The guy's a well-known surfer, and she wanted to see his villa. Devin went on to explain how the girls had conspired to have him meet this surfer, but Philip's mind was locked on his initial description of the man. Irene's boyfriend. The possessive part of his brain erupted like an angry demon. "What the fuck?" it said. In a calm, measured tone, the part of Philip that wanted to see his daughter as an individual, as a young adult, as a woman with her own needs, rose with confidence to meet the demon's anger. "Her happiness is the most important thing," it said. The battle of emotions was intense, but brief. In the end, Philip was hurt more than anything else. Because of telepathy, he was certain Ellie didn't know about the romance, but she was Irene's mother and would, under normal circumstances, find out first. And this Philip ground his teeth, is not normal. He felt a sudden flash of anger from the idea that Tafuri already knew. If he did, why didn't he mention it at the meeting? The little imp could have easily rubbed his daughter's relationship in his face, or worse, Philip thought, shared a compromising video. Philip recoiled at the long list of situations the old man might have stowed away in a library somewhere. This was an outrage. Tafuri had access to any physical space. And here Philip was, using the old man's technology to eavesdrop on a couple of Army veterans. Feeling guilty, he considered cutting the feed until Beto said, "Do you think Victor has any idea?" Devin shrugged. "I doubt it. Not that the man is dumb." He rubbed his chin. "More than anything, he's obsessed. That video was just an excuse to clamp down on the watchers. I'm not convinced he cares one way or the other about Olympia and me." "You don't have a daughter," Beto said. "Trust me, he cares." Yeah, Devin said. "I get that." He raised his hand and rubbed his neck. The sheepish gesture was ill-suited for such a physically imposing man. "Has Selena said anything?" he asked. "Like?" Beto lightened his tone to mimic his daughter. "Why is Uncle D dating a girl my age?" Devin sighed. "Yeah," he said, "something like that." "No, she hasn't," Beto said. "But if she did, I would tell her about Susan." "It's amazing," Devin smiled. "The resemblance and not just the looks." That would be the moral of the story. As if a 6-year-old Selena had appeared suddenly on the ship, Beto clasped his hands together and tilted his head. "Sweetie," he said, "your godfather has always had a thing for nerdy women." He wiped away the hypothetical moment by switching back to his normal voice. "For the 100th time, man," he exclaimed. "Why is that?" By way of deflection, Devin responded with another question. "Did you know that Selena and Irene Harrington are friends?" When Beto removed the cigar from his pocket, Philip noticed he didn't offer one to the other man. In his book, that was a point in Devin's favor. "They're part of a group that meets once a week," Beto said, "to discuss world events." He toasted the foot, raised the cigar to his lips, and with a look of satisfaction on his face, blew a long stream of smoke toward the sky. "They're especially fascinated by political parties." "That's so," Devin said. There was genuine curiosity in the way he tilted his head to one side and knitted his eyebrows together. "Are you okay with that?" he asked. Beto shrugged. "You have to admit, some legacy institutions are interesting, especially from a distance." The new rule did not explicitly ban political parties. It simply neutered them by eliminating primaries and replacing that flawed tradition with an interview process. Running for office on every level of government required approval from the patriarch in charge of that domain. The candidates were no longer crazy, craven, or delusional, so Americans had a 100% track record of electing sane, competent people. We couldn't stop the electorate from being stupid, Philip thought, but at least now they don't have stupid choices. He sighed. Irene's participation in this group didn't have the emotional valence of a romantic interest, but it was, in a way, concerning. He and Ellie had decided not to include political science in her education. Still, Irene's a smart girl, so he shouldn't be surprised that she'd taken it upon herself to fill that void. Devin said, "We knew this was going to happen. That's the whole point of Project Phoenix." Beto used the index finger to tap the side of his nose. "Downstairs," he said, "this yacht has a skiff." The drones followed the men as they retired to the lower deck, but once the door was closed and the room was secure, they couldn't transmit video through the reinforced walls of the sensitive compartmental information facility. Philip folded his arms, leaned back against the cushion, and focused on the audio. "When Victor bought the company," Devin said, "we assumed the other patriarchs wanted help with their watcher problem as well." Beto sighed. "Apparently, Victor made the same assumption. If you think about it, though, now that he's the only one on the council with access to military weapons and expertise, the other members are correct to believe he wants more power. Basically," Beto chuckled, "he's affirming that belief right now." "You can't blame Philip Harrington for wanting to kick him out of the group," Devin said. "No," Beto conceded, "you can't." When Philip heard an intake of breath, followed by the slow release of a long stream of air, he could almost smell the cigar being smoked by the president. Beto said, "You led that presentation in New York 4 days ago, correct?" "Yes, sir," Devin said. "At that time, did you think it would come to this?" "Nah," Devin replied. "You've got to understand, I was just there as head of security. Over House Dacos, Victor's domain, his company, what? All of it." The president blew another stream of smoke. "Had no idea you were so busy, my friend." "I don't spend all day sitting on my ass like some people." "Delegation," Beto lowered his voice. "That's the key." When Philip heard a chair squeak, he guessed that someone had leaned forward. Beto said, "I knew you didn't have to worry about money anymore, but I didn't know you were the Secretary of Defense for House Dacos." "Well," Devin said, "now you do." "Okay, then what's his role as owner?" "Silent partner at first," Devin said. "Typical civilian, clueless about our culture. But lately, Mike and the others are reporting that he's taken to calling them directly." Mike Costa was an operative in Delta Force at around the time Devin and Beto were stationed at Fort Bragg. From what Samir could find, they'd served together for 3 years. Devin founded Onyx Force after that brief stint in Army intelligence. By the time Victor bought the company, it was a global enterprise with 17,000 employees. Beto laughed. "Victor trying to bypass you?" "Yeah," Devin said. "How do Mike and the others respond when he calls?" "They pretend to follow his orders." "Then check with you before executing?" "Exactly." It was a subtle distinction, the difference between ownership and leadership. Like Victor, Philip had the means to purchase a military contracting company, and, also like Victor, he wouldn't know the first thing about managing soldiers. Beto said, "Good. We're going to need that loyalty when the time comes." Philip launched the T-Message app and sent a note to Samir. P. See what you can find on something called Project Phoenix. Cross-reference your search with the people involved in the Armed Forces movement. S. Will do. Any more information on Devin? P. Regarding his annual disappearance? No, not really. An hour and 45 minutes later, Philip was able to see the vessel he'd been eavesdropping on. The president's yacht appeared like a pebble in the vast expanse of clear blue ocean. Philip brought up the drone's metadata. One was now perched under Beto's seat. After the two men confirmed the key points of their briefing, Devin said, "It's 5-3. We should probably go up." When Philip crossed the bridge that had been erected between the two boats, he was struck by how Devin had, in 4 days, become the center of the universe. What the hell was Project Phoenix? What were his true feelings toward Olympia? What was the name of the man involved with Irene? After hearing his voice for 2 hours, Philip realized that Devin sounded much older than his 40 years. He had smooth cocoa skin, a chiseled jaw, and deep amber eyes. With an easy, confident smile, he extended his hand. "Mr. Harrington, a pleasure to see you again." "Philip, please. You're making me feel old." "Okay, Philip it is." Devin waved a hand toward the stairs. Once they were below deck, Philip got straight to the point. "How long has Victor been violating the treaty?" He only gave Devin a second to feign confusion. "You're operating in my domain," Philip said. "How long have your men been there?" Beto stared at his friend with an amused expression on his face. Ignoring the president, Devin said, 6 weeks. Good, Philip thought. That sounds plausible. He leaned forward, determined to maintain the momentum of truth-telling. "And during that time, how many watchers have you captured?" Devin broke eye contact in a way that suggested he was consulting Monaco. Philip happened to know that both he and Beto had a military version of the phone. Devin said, 62. "How does that rank?" Philip said, "among the other domains?" "That's the median. Victor and Tafuri are the outliers." Beto said, "Victor has the lowest, and Tafuri has the highest?" Devin let out a breath and leaned back in his chair. "Yeah," he shrugged. "Makes sense, doesn't it?" Philip said, What are you doing with the people you capture? Devin glanced at the president, then replied, transferring them to the proper authorities, of course. Subsequent to an interrogation, Philip pressed, Beto said, there's no law that prohibits talking to someone you've taken into custody. My people are skilled at getting information, Devin added. I bet they are, Philip thought. He folded his arms. What are you finding? Instead of Devin, to Philip's surprise, the answer came from Beto. If we had parties, they would be a political threat. None of these people subscribe to the sort of ideologies we saw in the 2020s and the 2030s. White supremacists, Christo-fascists, Devin added. Beto nodded. Exactly, nothing like that. To be honest, he said, we shouldn't be calling them terrorists. They're just citizens with strong opinions. Devin said, they're on the Fed's list because of Victor, which is a reflection of the fact that he doesn't get them at all. He's only right about one thing. The core group will never give up. Problem is, Beto added, if you come down too hard, the deeply committed will look like martyrs to all the others, which, in turn, would attract new followers. We predict that 82% of all Americans can be turned to their views. Philip frowned. After all we've done for this country? Beto's mouth curled into a wry smile, but his eyes were full of pity. Politicians have said the same thing, especially ones who held office before there was a council. Well, Philip said, I want to understand these people. Victor may not, but I do. Devin leaned forward. Once we hand them over, they take different paths through the criminal justice system. Some have records, most don't. And there isn't a leader, Beto said, not in the way you're thinking. Philip let out a sigh, unfolded his arms, and leaned toward the table. At our next quarterly meeting, a group of patriarchs will move to kick Victor off the council for violating the treaty. Given what you've said, it sounds like he has a case for action. Philip pointed at Devin, but that action is only legal inside of his domain. Devin said, which means what, exactly? He raised his eyebrows. Sounds like you're planning to hold someone accountable. Philip flicked his hand in the air dismissively. Your ass is covered, soldier, don't worry. He pointed at Beto. I want you at our next meeting. But that's, yes, I know, Philip said. That's not protocol, according to the treaty. He set his jaw. I'll take care of that. Devin said, so what's the plan? I'm going to move that Beto have a chance to present information related to the Watchers before Victor puts his amendment to a vote. Philip locked eyes with Devin. Those maps with dots in all of our domains, you've only shown those to me, correct? Yes, sir, Devin said. Beto snapped his fingers. My presentation will trigger deliberations about the problem before the council is aware Victor has already taken action to solve it. Devin let out a breath. In violation of the treaty. Precisely, Philip said. That revelation will go off like a bomb in the chamber. Once the dust settles, Victor's expulsion will appear to be the only logical course of action. Devin said, to everyone except Victor. Philip leaned back in his chair. He's going to try and use Onyx. Yeah, Devin said, he'll try, but that's where I come in. Despite his eavesdropping, Philip saw the need to feign ignorance. He raised an eyebrow and said, it's his company now. Devin said, don't worry about that. Philip nodded and leaned forward, poised to go. In the meantime, I'm going to have my people work on legal ways to address the Watchers. So first and foremost, I need to know, what do they want? The two soldiers glanced at each other as if they didn't know what to say. This is fucking ridiculous, Philip thought. Well, gentlemen, he said, after dozens of interrogations, I'm assuming you know what they want. This time, when Devin locked eyes with Philip, his expression was cold. It's simple, he said. They want to go back to living in a country without a council.